It's no fun when our kids are sick, but we may just have found the silver lining. Apple and raspberry and orange flavoured electrolyte slushies made by Rehydrate.
Rehydrate slushies are a tasty way to get essential electrolytes into our little ones when they're dehydrated from sickness or even just the Aussie heat. They're delicious and they'll help your little ones feel better in no time. Grab Rehydrate from Coles today. We've got to build hope. We've got to find hope in our own lives, hope for a better future, and then we've got to be able to convey that hope to our kids.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time poor parent who just wants answers now.
G'day, this is Dr. Justin Coulson, the author of 6 books about raising happy families, and I'm here with my wife and co-host, Kylie, Mrs. Happy Families, the mum to our 6 kids. And before we get into a fairly heady and heavy kind of challenging topic today, just a little bit of feedback that's come through via the email, podcasts@happyfamilies.com.au. We're getting a fair bit of correspondence, honey. Some people are really enjoying the podcast. You remember a little while ago we had this conversation about it was episode 130. We're topping the charts and in the worst way. And it was about Australian kids doing really badly when it comes to bullying. We're at the top of the table where there's a lot of bullying going on in the world. It happens in our homes. It happens in our schools. It happens in our workplaces. And Ben from Western Australia sent us an email and he just said, Dr. Coulson, you can't imagine how much your words have resonated with me when you said that our hearts are not turned to our neighbours and also that we're very competitive in our society. And then he went on to talk about how in European society where he's from, it's all about community. It's all about being close together. It's all about turning your hearts towards your neighbours and just basically said a whole bunch of really, really nice things. He said, thanks so much for all of your work and gave this gorgeous feedback about episode 130. We're topping the charts and in the worst way. If you haven't heard it, I reckon it might be something that you'd love to tap into. And also some feedback that came from Karen, who said, and this was about the one that you and I had the conversation about just recently, hormones driving everyone crazy. Karen has tapped into this. In fact, we've had a bit of correspondence around this episode. And Karen said, please check out Lucy Peach. Lucy Peach has given this TED Talk. It's called The Power of the Period. And she says, the past year I've definitely noticed changes in mood, sex drive, energy levels and motivation depending on stages in my cycle. It's a real thing. I do think as we go into perimenopause that these stages have a bigger impact on us. Most of my friends in the late 30s to 40s are having a similar experience. She said she loves having Mrs. Happy Families on the podcast and just wanted to share that the Lucy Peach TED Talk, The Power of the Period. And because we got such great feedback from that conversation that was a little bit tough for us to have, I thought that it was worth sharing and just wonderful to be getting this feedback. We appreciate it so much.
Lucy Peach, I'll definitely have to check her out.
The Power of the Period.
Well, last week you were on TV on Channel 7 with Larry and Kylie talking about divorce and separation. From what I understand, I didn't actually get to see it. You seem to have these conversations when I'm, doing the school run.
Well, not everyone's got time to sit on the TV and, watch what's going on.
So I haven't heard it, but I have heard that it was a great conversation. And I thought it would be really good for us to kind of tap into this conversation here on the podcast because not everyone would have seen you.
No, it's a really tough topic to talk about and we get a lot of inquiry. I mean, the number one thing that we get asked questions about at Happy Families, either on the website or in our membership or anything like that, is, how to discipline the kids, how to deal with just the day-to-day parenting stress. But one of our top 5 questions, and it's something that I don't talk about a lot because you and I have a relationship where this has never been countenanced, is separation and divorce. How do you do this right? How do you talk to the kids about it? And I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, but I kind of in some ways feel unqualified to talk about it because we've never had to talk to our children about it. But obviously when the TV calls and they want to have that discussion, my hope is that I can share some things that are useful.
Well, 2020 has been this really crazy year for the world. And I would be really interested to see, I don't know if there's been any, studies done so far based on what we've experienced, whether or not divorce and separation, rates have increased as a result of COVID and this pandemic that we've been dealing with.
So if you flick through the Australian, Google that topic for the Australian context, we don't have any stats out yet. So we don't actually know. But if you look at newspapers, mainly newspapers like The Guardian and the Sydney Morning Herald, those that probably sit a little bit to the left of centre, they were all very much predicting that divorce would skyrocket because we've got lockdown, we've got families that have been, in close quarters. And there is no question at all that for some families, particularly those where relationships are not safe, this could be devastating. It could be catastrophic. But we do have data from overseas. And in the United States, exactly the opposite has happened. What the data shows in the US is that divorce rates are at an all-time low and that COVID has not done anything at all to accelerate the breakup of relationships. Nevertheless, relationships still break up, whether it's COVID related or not. And it's probably worth talking about some valuable things that we can share with our kids to help them to get through it and also to help us through it. Let's do that next.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
For a happier family, try a Happy Families membership because a happy family doesn't just happen. Details at happyfamilies.com.au.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. We're talking about how to talk to kids about separation and divorce. Just before we do that, though, we asked a handful of parents what their best advice was for any other parents who might be going through a separation or divorce.
If I could change one thing, it would definitely be to really work on a decent friendship and relationship despite the hurt and whatnot that's happened and being caused by the breakdown. The child didn't ask to be here. The child didn't ask for the separation, but they definitely deserve both parents.
So I guess the first question I'd want to know the answer to is how do I talk to my children about this if this becomes my reality?
Yeah, I reckon there's a couple of things that are really important here. The first is you've got to choose your timing. I know that this sort of sounds obvious, but don't have the conversation right before the kids go to bed. Can you imagine having the conversation and saying, all right, kids, off to sleep, good night. I mean, just terrible. You want to do it at a time where there's plenty of time, there's no rush. You got to get that timing right. Don't do it on a special day. If it's somebody's birthday today or tomorrow or it's Christmas coming up next week, just hang out for a little bit longer. Just wait. You don't want to ruin it for everybody. Obviously, you can't get this right all the time, but to the degree that you can, avoid bed, avoid special days, avoid just before school. I mean, imagine having the conversation and saying, all right, kids, off to school. Good luck today. I just don't think we can be sensitive enough around this because no matter how well we do it, most kids are going to be absolutely heartbroken unless there's some sort of domestic abuse or coercive control going on. And even in those cases, the kids are still going to be frightened and traumatized. It's a hard thing. But in terms of the conversation itself, a couple of critical things. First off, you really want to make sure you've planned it before you sit down to have the conversation. This is not a conversation where you just shoot from the hip. You absolutely need to plan it out and present a united front. You and your partner or ex-partner may not be united on many things, but on this, you absolutely must be united. It's critical that there's no blame game. And what that means is that you say to the kids, first and foremost, kids often blame themselves for this. So you need to say to the kids something along these lines. You want to say something like, we aren't happy together, or we want the fighting to stop, or you've watched us try to work this out, but it's not working. So that kind of a conversation that there's no blame game. You're highlighting that you've tried and you're talking about what you do want. We want the fighting to stop. You might even say, we wish that our family could be happy and have all of us stay together. But we've made a decision that your dad and I or your mum and I are going to separate. And at this point, we don't know how long that will be for. It might be for a long time or it might not be for very long at all. But we want the fighting to stop. We've tried to work it out. We haven't been happy. This is the decision we've made. And the kids need to know it's not a negotiation. This is the decision that we've made as the parents. At that point, what you really want to do is highlight a couple of quick things. First of all, here's what's staying the same, because stability and predictability is important. And then here's what's going to change. And again, this is why you've got to plan it out, right? You have to plan it out so you know what's changing and what's staying the same. They need to know that they are loved, no matter what, those three vitally important words. And then essentially you let them talk, you let them share their feelings, you answer their questions.
That would be a really tough conversation to have.
Yeah, and I think that families that do it well are the ones that take the time. The parents say, all right, this is the decision we've made, but we now need to be adults and make sure that we're on the same page when we talk to the kids. Regardless of whether they're 3 or 23, we want to go through this process.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you were talking, I was thinking back to a couple that we knew many, many years ago, and they had gone through separation and divorce. And for me, as a new friend coming into the situation, I actually didn't know they were divorced because they had worked through their challenges in such a way and recognized that their kids were paramount. Their kids' happiness was the most important thing to them, that even though they couldn't get on together in each other's space, that separation had given them the space to learn to love and respect each other as individuals. From a distance, and created this beautiful space for their children to grow up with parents who couldn't do it together but separate were actually stronger for it.
Now, that's the ideal, but the reality is that there's a lot of emotion around this, and the fallout can very often be very, very nasty.
And I came into their lives many years after the initial stage, so they've had time to work through that process.
Yeah, but if it's acrimonious, if it's really, really nasty, let's say there's been infidelity, it's not going to be useful to sit down and say, well, kids, this is happening because your mum or your dad was unfaithful to me. That's not going to be a helpful conversation. As the kids get older, then you might discuss that. Or if they're old enough and, you say, all right, what questions have you got? And they're like, well, why, what's going on? You may agree ahead of time that you're going to make a confession and make sure that the kids are aware of what's happened if they're old enough and if you think that they're ready for that. But generally what I would say is keep it as harmonious as you can. If there is acrimony, you want to just make sure that everyone's safe. And if there's genuine dramas, the family court. But my goodness, it can be capricious. So it's a tricky one.
So we've had this conversation. We've listened to our children. We've, kind of
because we're getting it perfect now after all these years of not. Yeah.
Wow. As a parent, how do I know if my children are not okay? This is going to shake their world, rock their world in ways that probably nothing else would have.
Yeah, the research shows that it typically does. It's really tricky because in the short term, you would expect that they're going to be terribly upset. That's what happens. And when somebody's terribly upset, they do things that you would say, well, they're obviously not coping, and it's because they're not. What we're really looking for is an ongoing pattern of behavior that lasts more than a couple of weeks of grieving, maybe a couple of months even of grieving. If we see this ongoing pattern of withdrawal, if there's school problems, if there's friendship issues, if there's outbursts and aggression, if the grief is so great that it's interfering with normal functioning after they've had a grief period, and let's face it, that grief period may be lifelong for some kids who just want their family to be together. If their mood swings are there, if they're getting sick, I'm sick, I can't go to school, I'm sick, I can't do this. Those are all the kinds of things that I'd be looking out for. And often it will be because their hearts are broken. And I know that I'm not trying to create guilt here for parents. This is a hard thing. I don't know any parent who says, oh yeah, we just decided to give up on the marriage. People don't do this easily. This is hard. But the kids will sometimes just say, this is so hard that I'm having physical issues because of the psychological sadness that's occurred.
So again, I guess the last thing that I'd really love to get your advice on is how do I help my child who's struggling with this when my life as the parent has literally fallen apart as well? So I'm in trauma mode myself, coming to terms with what's going on. And now I have a child or children who are not coping with this either. How do we work through this together? Because I feel broken.
Yeah, the short answer, it's not easy, and I don't want this to sound glib, but my one word answer is hope. We've got to build hope. We've got to find hope in our own lives, hope for a better future, and then we've got to be able to convey that hope to our kids. And that means we've got to have something to look forward to. We've got to believe that, hope really comes down to three things. Number one, you've got to set new goals. Even if you don't feel like it, even if you never want to set another goal for the rest of your life, work out, well, what do I want now? And set a new goal. Next, you've got to figure out different pathways to get there because you're pretty much guaranteed that the first pathway you try won't work and maybe the second and third won't either. So you've got to have the tenacity, the belief that there are pathways to get to where you want to go, even if it seems impossible now. Maybe you've just divorced and you're now a single mum and you decide to set the goal that you're going to get a university degree and finish your education and, start a new life, start a new career. And that might just seem so improbable. But if you can work out some pathways towards that goal, all of a sudden you've got something to look forward to. And then the third thing is you've actually got to have the self-belief. And that, I think that's actually the biggest one. I talk to so many people who go through a breakup, go through a separation, a divorce, and they actually lose their sense of value. They feel like if they couldn't make that relationship work, if somebody left them, chose somebody else instead of them, they mustn't be worthy as a person. And we've got to be able to somehow find within ourselves this self-belief that, hang on, I do have goals. They are worth pursuing and I'm worthy of them. Therefore, I will take this pathway or that pathway, or I'll go down as many pathways as I need to because I believe in myself even if that person didn't. That's a reflection of them, not me. And if we can do that for ourselves, then it becomes easier for us to build hope in our children. Hey, kids, here's what we're working towards now. This is what we're aiming for. This is the pathway we're treading, and this is why. And you start to become a leader in your family again. And I would say it's really heavy. It's hard stuff, but that's what I'd be suggesting.
You and I have obviously never been through a separation or divorce as a couple. But as you were talking, I was, thinking about a couple of really challenging experiences that I have been through personally that have left me feeling all of those things as an individual. And the one thing that got me through those really, really tough times was having the village. We've talked about this a number of times in different episodes, and just surrounding yourself with people who believe in you and who love you and who can be there for your children when you can't. I think that, that is just such a powerful thing for us to have when we feel like we're broken.
Yeah, beautiful insight. Well, this has been a really important conversation. Difficult and challenging, but important. If you've enjoyed the Happy Families podcast, can you please visit Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and review? I know I say it at the end of every single podcast, but I can't tell you how important it is for other people finding the show. So we would love it if you could dive on there and leave a rating and review. So very much appreciated. We also are grateful to Justin Rulon from Bridge Media for making us sound great. And our executive producer is Craig Bruce. If you'd like more info about how we can help make your family flourish, please jump onto happyfamilies.com.au. Oh, and by the way, Black Friday, just days away. Please join us for some incredible savings on all of our resources so that you can make your family happier. You'll get all the info on our Facebook page, Dr. Justin Coulson's Happy Families, and at happyfamilies.com.au.